The council chamber was enormous. 12 species had sent their representatives to Meridian Prime, and they sat in a great circle beneath lights that shifted color to match whoever was speaking. Daniel Brooks had been sitting in humanity's designated section for 6 hours now. His legs were stiff. His coffee had gone cold long ago, but his face showed nothing but patience. Price sat beside him, her fingers tapping silently against her data pad. She was younger than Daniel by 20 years, but her mind was sharp enough to cut through any argument. Right now, she was calculating how many times the council had skipped over humanity's turn to speak. The number was 14. High of the species controlled the speaking order. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that shifted to purple when he was pleased with himself. It had been purple for most of the day. His species had dominated the council for 3 centuries, and he saw no reason why that should ever change. The matter of the Orion Corridor trade routes, and announced, his voice filling the chamber through hidden speakers. Ambassador of the Dominion has a proposal. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Humanity had requested access to the Orion Corridor for 5 years. It was the reason they had come to this summit. Finally, someone was going to address it. Ambassador rose from his seat. He was shorter than most, but his voice carried the weight of an empire that had conquered 60 worlds. His scales were bright red, a sign of high status among his kind. The Orion Corridor is too valuable to risk, said. The routes pass through sensitive regions. They require experienced navigation. They demand mature species who understand the responsibilities involved. Tapping stopped. Daniel's expression did not change, but something cold settled in his chest. Humanity has been a member of this council for 15 years, continued. That is nothing, a blink, a child's first breath. They have no significant fleet. They have no ancient history. They contribute little and demand much. Murmurs of agreement rippled through several sections of the chamber. Daniel noticed that the delegation was nodding. I propose that humanity be banned from the 17 primary trade routes of the Orion Corridor, said. Furthermore, I suggest we reconsider their full membership status. Perhaps observer status would be more appropriate for such a young species. The cold in Daniel's chest spread outward. He had served humanity for 30 years. He had shaken hands with beings who could crush him with a thought. He had smiled through insults and swallowed his pride more times than he could count. All of it was for this moment. All of it was so humanity could have a voice. He raised his hand to request speaking time. Anne's eyes passed over him without stopping. The council will now hear from the collective regarding their support for Ambassador's proposal. Grabbed Daniel's arm. They skipped us again. I know. That's 15 times. I know. The representative spoke for 20 minutes about the dangers of allowing primitive species into important regions. Then the spoke about tradition. Then the spoke about security. Each one praised wisdom. Each one ignored the human delegation entirely. 2 more hours passed. Finally, Anne's gaze settled on Daniel. The human ambassador may now speak. You have 3 minutes. Daniel stood slowly. His knees ached from sitting so long, but he did not show it. He walked to the center of the chamber where a small platform waited for speakers. Every eye in the room watched him, some with curiosity, most with contempt. Daniel began. Humanity came to this summit with a simple request. We asked for fair access to trade routes that we helped map. We asked for recognition of the work our engineers have done maintaining communication relays across 40 systems. We asked only for the respect that any member species deserves. Your 3 minutes are limited and interrupted. Please get to your point. Daniel took a breath. My point is that humanity has given much to this council. Our cargo ships carry goods for 31 species. Our medical teams. Enough, stood from his seat, breaking protocol. We have heard enough human complaints. You are a young species. You should be grateful we allow you here at all, accept observer status. Learn your place. Perhaps in a few centuries you will be ready for true membership." Laughter echoed through the chamber. The delegation's skin had turned deep purple. They were clicking their claws in approval. Even species that had said nothing all day were smiling at humanity's humiliation. Daniel stood perfectly still on the speaker's platform. He looked at the faces around him. He saw the contempt, the dismissal, the absolute certainty that humanity did not matter. He reached up and removed his translation device from his ear. The small piece of technology had allowed him to understand every insult, every joke at humanity's expense. He held it in his palm for a moment, then placed it gently on the platform. When he spoke, his words were in English. No one else in the chamber could understand them. "You will remember this day." He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, Price rose from her seat. Then the rest of the human delegation stood. 12 men and women in simple gray suits walked out of the chamber in perfect silence. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. For a moment, the chamber was quiet. Then laughed. "Good riddance. They will come crawling back within a week." And skin was bright purple with satisfaction. Indeed, let them sulk. When their ships need repairs and their colonies need supplies, they will learn to accept their proper place. The council moved on to other business. Trade agreements were signed. Territorial disputes were settled. No one paid attention to the empty seats where humanity had sat. But in the corner of the delegation, an elderly advisor named Counselor remained silent. She had not laughed when the humans left. She had not smiled when made his jokes. She had spent 40 years studying younger species. She had watched humanity closely since they first made contact. She knew things about them that the rest of the council had never bothered to learn. When the session ended and the other delegates filed out and approached her with a satisfied expression, "A productive day, would you not agree?" Looked at him with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "You have made a terrible mistake." And laughed. "They are humans, what could they possibly do?" Did not answer. She simply gathered her things and walked away, wondering how long it would take for the council to understand what they had lost. The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. 3 weeks had passed since the humans walked out of the council chamber. Hyan had expected them to return within days. He had prepared a speech about forgiveness and second chances. He had even practiced looking disappointed rather than triumphant. But the humans did not come back. The first signs of trouble appeared on the medical station orbiting there. Chief Administrator was reviewing supply reports when his assistant rushed into the office with panic in her eyes. "We are out of surgical," she said. "The last shipment never arrived." Check the records. They came from human manufacturing facilities. They had been supplied at cost for the past 12 years as part of a medical cooperation agreement. The agreement had been considered so minor that most officials had forgotten it existed. "Contact the humans," ordered. "Tell them we need an emergency shipment." "I tried. There is no response. Their communication channels are closed." Felt the first hint of cold fear. Without surgical, complex operations would become impossible. Thousands of patients were scheduled for procedures in the coming weeks. On the other side of the galaxy, they experienced something that had not happened in 400 years. Their planetary communication network went dark for 6 hours. When technicians finally restored the system, they discovered that a key relay station had failed. The station had been maintained by human engineers who volunteered for the assignment because no one else wanted to work in such a remote location. The engineers were gone. They had left 3 weeks ago. No one had noticed. Shaw stood in his office on Earth, looking at a wall of screens showing shipping data from across human space. He was the director of the Human Interstellar Commerce Authority, and his job had become very simple in recent weeks. He was shutting everything down. "All freight services are now suspended," he announced to his staff. No human cargo vessel will enter Council space until further notice. A young officer raised her hand. Sir, 31 species rely on our shipping network. Some of them have no other way to transport essential goods. Nodded, I know, that is the point. Dr. Laura joined him by the window. She was the chief economist for the Human Coalition, and she had spent the last 3 weeks calculating exactly how much humanity had been giving away. The numbers are remarkable, she said quietly. We have been subsidizing 17 trade routes at a loss. Our engineers maintain infrastructure on 42 worlds without payment. Our medical supplies keep 6 species alive during their disease seasons. Turned to look at her, and none of them ever said thank you. Not once. Commander Mitchell was stationed at the border between human space and Council territory. His patrol fleet was small, just 15 ships, but they had maintained peace along the frontier for a decade. Now they had new orders. No one was allowed to cross. A diplomatic vessel approached the border and requested entry. Mitchell responded with the same message he had sent to every ship that came near. Human space is closed to Council vessels. Please turn around. This is urgent, the captain insisted. I carry a message from Hyan himself. Then Hyan can come deliver it in person. Until then, turn around. The vessel lingered at the border for 2 hours before finally retreating. Back on Meridian Prime, the Council held an emergency session. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Communication failures, medical shortages, cargo delays, infrastructure breakdowns. Each report seemed unrelated, but Counselor saw the pattern clearly. These are not coincidences, she told the Assembly. Every failure traces back to services that humans were providing. We never realized how much they were doing because they never asked for recognition. Ambassador slammed his claw against his desk. This is sabotage. The humans are deliberately destroying our systems to punish us. No, replied calmly. They are simply no longer helping. There is a difference. And stood at the center of the chamber, his skin flickering between gray and purple as his emotions shifted. How is this possible? They are a young species. They have limited resources. How could they have become so important in only 15 years? Had asked herself the same question. She had spent the past 3 weeks searching for answers. What she found had disturbed her deeply. Humans do not think like us, she explained. When they joined the Council, they did not seek power or territory. They looked for ways to help. They offered their cargo ships to species who needed transport. They sent engineers to repair stations that other species had abandoned. They developed medical treatments and shared them freely. Why would they do that? Demanded. What did they want in return? That is what I could not understand at first, admitted. But I believe I know now. They wanted to be valued. They wanted to be seen as partners and equals. They wanted respect. The chamber fell silent. Instead, continued, we took their help and gave them contempt. We laughed at their kindness. We dismissed their contributions as insignificant. And when they asked for something small in return, access to trade routes they had helped build, we told them they were not worthy. And skin had gone pale gray. What do they want now? What will it take to bring them back? Shook her head slowly. I do not know. I have tried to contact Ambassador Brooks through private channels. There has been no response. I fear they have decided that we are not worth talking to. At that moment, an aide rushed into the chamber with a data pad. His face was white with fear. He handed the pad to Anne, who read the message and closed his eyes. What is it? Demanded. Anne's voice was barely a whisper. A colony has sent a distress signal. Their life support systems are failing. 2 million people will die within days unless they receive replacement parts. Then send a repair team, said. The parts they need come from human factories. They are the only ones who make them. And looked up at the assembly with something new in his eyes. It was fear. Without human help, those people will die. The council erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted accusations and demands. Some blamed the humans. Some blamed and for letting the situation reach this point. But in the middle of the noise, Counselor sat quietly, remembering something she had read in a human history text. They had a saying about bridges. You never know how much you need one until you have burned it down. The colony was called New Haven. It sat on a cold world at the edge of explored space, home to 2 million people who had built their lives far from the comforts of the. They were miners, farmers, engineers, families who wanted a fresh start, children who had never known any other home. Now they were dying. Minister had been the colonial administrator for 12 years. He had handled storms, equipment failures, and supply shortages, but he had never faced anything like this. The life support systems that kept his people warm and breathing were failing one by one. Replacement parts existed, but they were manufactured in human space, and human space was closed. He made a decision that no leader had ever made before. He got on a small transport ship and flew to the human border, alone. Captain Grant saw the tiny vessel approaching on her sensors. She commanded the patrol ship Horizon, one of 15 vessels that guarded the border between human space and the Council. Her orders were clear. No one gets through. Single transport, her tactical officer reported. No weapons, no escort. They are broadcasting a distress signal and requesting permission to approach. Studied the signal data. Something about this felt different. Council ships had been testing the border for weeks, sending probes and diplomatic vessels to look for weaknesses. But this was just one small ship, practically defenseless. Open a channel, she ordered. Minister's face appeared on her screen. He looked exhausted. His scales, which should have been bright red with authority, had faded to a dull orange. His eyes carried the weight of 2 million lives. I am minister of the New Haven colony, he said. I come alone. I come unarmed. I come to beg. Had been trained to handle diplomatic situations, but nothing had prepared her for the sight of an official using that word. Beg. They did not beg. They demanded. They conquered. They never admitted weakness. What do you need? She asked. Life support components. Without them my people will die, all of them, children included. His voice cracked. I know what my government did to your ambassador. I know the council treated your people with contempt. I cannot undo those things, but I can stand here and tell you that the people on my colony did nothing wrong. They are innocent. Please help them. Turned off the visual feed and looked at her bridge crew. They had all heard the message. They had all seen the desperation in his eyes. What are our orders? Her tactical officer asked quietly. No one crosses the border, replied, but the words felt heavy in her mouth. She opened a channel to Fleet Admiral Palmer at human command. His face appeared on screen, tired but alert. He had been handling border situations constantly for 6 weeks. Captain Grant, report. Explained the situation. When she finished, Palmer was silent for a long moment. Your orders stand, he said finally. We cannot make exceptions. The moment we open the door for one, 100 others will demand the same treatment. The Council needs to understand that their actions have consequences. Sir, there are children on that colony, 2 million people. I know, Palmer's expression was pained. Do you think I enjoy this? Do you think any of us wanted it to come to this? We spent 15 years helping them, building their infrastructure, saving their lives, and they spat in our faces. He took a breath. Hold the border, Captain. That is an order. The channel closed. Sat in her command chair, staring at the image of ship on her sensors. Somewhere behind her, she heard her daughter's voice. Lieutenant Grant was the youngest officer on the Horizon. She had joined the crew 6 months ago, fresh from the academy. Had pulled strings to get her assigned to the same ship. It was selfish, maybe, but she wanted to keep her daughter close. Mom rarely called her that while on duty. We cannot just let them die. We have orders. Orders that will kill 2 million innocent people. Turned to look at her daughter. Was 22 years old with her father's stubborn jaw and her mother's fierce eyes. She was everything had hoped she would become. Brave, compassionate, unwilling to accept injustice. "What would you have me do?" asked quietly. Did not answer, but that night after her shift ended, she went to the shuttle bay. Amy Torres was a journalist who had positioned herself at the border to document the crisis. Her broadcasts reached billions of viewers across human space and beyond. She was the one who captured the footage that would change everything. Her camera recorded Minister kneeling in front of the human patrol line. He had left his ship in a small pressure suit and floated in the void, his arms outstretched in a gesture of supplication. The image was broadcast across the galaxy within hours. A minister kneeling before humans, begging for mercy. The council chamber erupted when the footage arrived. Ambassador screamed that it was a trick, a manipulation designed to make the look weak. Hyan sat in stunned silence, unable to process what he was seeing. But Counselor recognized the truth, was not performing for the cameras. He was a leader watching his people die and doing the only thing he could think of to save them. "This is what we have done," she said to anyone who would listen. "This is the result of our arrogance." On the human border, something unexpected happened. A small medical shuttle detached from the horizon and crossed into Council space. It carried enough life support components to save the colony for 3 months. It was piloted by a young woman in a human uniform. Grant watched her daughter's shuttle disappear into Council territory. She could have stopped her. She could have ordered the patrol ships to intercept. Instead, she said nothing. Grant reached New Haven 12 hours later. She landed in the main colony plaza and opened her cargo bay. The colonists rushed forward, not to attack but to embrace. Children clung to her legs, crying with relief. When the news reached Human Command, Fleet Admiral Palmer demanded an explanation. Grant stood at attention and gave him one. "My daughter disobeyed orders, sir. She will face whatever consequences you decide. But she did what humans do. She saw people suffering and she helped them. That is who we are." Palmer was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised her. "The shuttle that reached New Haven, it was not tracked by our sensors. As far as official records show, it never left the horizon." Understood. There would be no punishment, not officially, but there would also be no acknowledgement. Humanity would help because they could not stop themselves from helping, but they would not take credit for it. The Council had asked what humanity wanted. The answer was simple. They wanted to be seen for who they truly were, and they were willing to wait as long as it took. 10 weeks had passed since humanity walked out of the Council chamber. The galaxy was different now. Every species that had laughed at the humans was struggling with problems they could not solve alone. Every world that had dismissed human contributions was discovering just how much they had depended on them. Hyan ordered a full review of human activities over the past 15 years. He assigned the task to Counselor, the only member of his delegation, who had warned him about the consequences of insulting humanity. Spent 4 days buried in records, reports, and data files that no one had bothered to read before. What she found made her feel sick. She presented her findings to the Council on a cold morning, when the artificial lights of Meridian Prime seemed dimmer than usual. "Humanity held us together," she began. "We never noticed because they never asked for credit. They simply did the work and moved on to the next task." She activated a display that showed a web of connections spreading across the galaxy. Each line represented a human contribution: engineering support, medical supplies, cargo transport, emergency rescue, diplomatic mediation. The lines covered nearly every corner of known space. 40% of our infrastructure was maintained by human volunteers, continued. They repaired stations we had abandoned. They staffed outposts in regions too dangerous or too boring for our own people. They developed medical treatments and shared them at cost. They built communication relays and asked nothing in return except the right to use them alongside us. The council chamber was silent. Representatives who had spent weeks blaming humanity for their problems were now staring at the evidence of human generosity. Why? And asked. His skin had lost all its color, he looked old and tired. Why would they do all this? Had asked the same question. She had found the answer in the writings of human philosophers and historians. Today, she had brought an expert to explain it. Ward was a human cultural historian who had spent 30 years studying council species. She was one of the few humans who had remained on Meridian Prime after the walkout, protected by academic neutrality that even Ambassador could not violate. She stood before the council with no fear in her eyes. She had spent her career trying to help aliens understand humanity. Now, finally, they were ready to listen. Humans are a social species, she explained. We evolved in small groups where cooperation meant survival. Helping others is not a strategy for us. It is instinct. When we see someone in need, we feel physical discomfort until we do something about it. But we gave them nothing in return and said, we mocked them, we insulted them, we treated them like children. Yes, agreed. And they kept helping anyway because that is who they are. They did not help you to gain advantage. They helped you because you needed help. The only thing they wanted was for you to see them as equals, partners, friends. She paused to let her words sink in. Instead, you saw their kindness as weakness. You thought that because they did not demand payment, their contributions had no value. You were wrong. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. It was old and rough, belonging to someone who had not addressed the council in decades. Admiral the Elder moved slowly down the central aisle. She was Ambassador's grandmother, a legendary military commander who had retired 50 years ago. Her scales had faded to pale pink with age, but her eyes were still sharp. I fought alongside humans once, she said. During the border wars when pirates threatened our shipping lanes, a human medical ship responded to our distress call. They had no weapons, no armor, just doctors and nurses who wanted to save lives. She stopped in the center of the chamber and looked directly at her grandson. Our flagship was burning. Hundreds of my crew were dying from radiation burns. The human ship docked with us despite the danger. Their medics worked for 30 hours straight, treating our wounded, saving lives that our own doctors had given up on. Ambassador tried to speak, but his grandmother silenced him with a look. One of their medics died saving me, a young man named Hayes. He shielded me from an explosion with his own body. He did not know me. He had no reason to care whether I lived or died, but he gave his life so that I could continue mine. Admiral the Elder turned to face the full council. I owed humanity a debt I could never repay, and when my grandson led the effort to humiliate them, I said nothing. I was a coward, but I will not be silent anymore. She removed a medal from her chest. It was the highest honor the military could bestow, and she had worn it for 50 years. This belongs to the family of Hayes. I should have given it to them decades ago. The chamber remained silent as she walked toward the exit. At the door, she turned back. You ask what humanity wants. They want you to see them clearly, not as children, not as primitives, not as servants who exist to make your lives easier. They want you to see them as they truly are, people who help because helping is right, who forgive because holding grudges is poison, who walked away not because they were weak, but because staying would have meant accepting that kindness had no value. She left without another word. In the days that followed, other species began sending private messages to human space. They offered trade deals, military alliances, and territorial concessions. They begged, bargained, and bribed. Daniel Brooks rejected every offer with the same simple response. Humanity will accept nothing less than a public acknowledgement from the full council. We do not want your deals. We want your respect. Ambassador, desperate to salvage his reputation, proposed a military strike against human border stations. He argued that humanity's refusal to negotiate was an act of war that justified a forceful response. The proposal died immediately. 7 species admitted that their fleets relied on navigation systems designed by human engineers. Without access to human technical support, their ships would be unable to coordinate effectively. A war against humanity would cripple the Council's own military capabilities. And received the news in his private chambers. He sat alone in the darkness, thinking about everything he had done wrong. He had believed that age meant wisdom, that size meant power, that kindness meant weakness. Humanity had proven him wrong on all counts. A message arrived from his aide. 3 species had announced their intention to leave the Council and align with humanity unless major reforms were implemented. The alliance he had spent his entire career building was beginning to collapse. Found him still sitting in the darkness hours later. "What do we do now?" he asked her. "The only thing we can do," she replied. "We admit we were wrong, we apologize, we ask for forgiveness and hope they are willing to give it." Will they forgive us? Thought about everything she had learned about humans, their capacity for kindness, their stubborn hope, their belief that people could change. "I do not know," she admitted, "but I believe they want to, we just have to give them a reason." That night, and announced his resignation as high. It was the first time in 3 centuries that a leader had stepped down voluntarily. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what would happen next. 16 weeks after humanity walked out of the council chamber, the galaxy stood at a crossroads. 3 species had formally announced their departure from the council. 7 more were threatening to follow. The alliance that had maintained peace for centuries was crumbling. Elder Speaker emerged from retirement to take control of the crisis. She was the oldest living, nearly 400 years old, with memories that stretched back to a time before the council existed. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched species destroy themselves through arrogance and pride. She recognized the pattern unfolding now. "We must go to them," she told the remaining council members. Not as rulers demanding obedience, but as equals asking for another chance. Ambassador had been removed from his position by his own government. His grandmother's speech had turned public opinion against him. He sat in the gallery now, stripped of his authority, watching as the council he had tried to dominate collapsed around him. Elder Speaker traveled to human space alone. Her ship was old and slow, a personal vessel she had owned for 2 centuries. She refused all escorts and protection. When she reached the border, she sent a simple message. I wish to speak with Ambassador Brooks. I come without conditions. I come without demands. I come only with the hope that we might begin again." Daniel Brooks received the message in his office on Earth. He had spent 16 weeks refusing every diplomatic overture the council had attempted. He had rejected bribes, threats, and everything in between. But this was different. He agreed to meet on a neutral asteroid halfway between human space and council territory. No aides, no translators, just 2 old diplomats sitting in a small room with a window that looked out at the stars. Spoke first, "I am sorry." Daniel had heard those words many times in his career. They were usually followed by explanations, justifications, and carefully worded conditions. He waited for it to continue. But she did not continue. She simply sat in silence, letting the apology stand on its own. "Your council humiliated us," Daniel said finally. "They laughed at our contributions. They dismissed our worth. They told us we did not belong." "Yes. And now you want us to come back." Shook her head slowly. "I do not want you to come back. I want you to give us another chance. There is a difference." Daniel studied her face. She was ancient by any standard, her skin wrinkled and gray, her eyes clouded by age. but there was something in her expression that he had rarely seen in council representatives: honesty. "Why did you come?" he asked. "Because I have lived long enough to recognize when a species has something valuable to teach. Humanity has shown us something we forgot long ago. Strength is not measured by the power to destroy. It is measured by the willingness to build, to help, and to walk away when dignity demands it. We did not walk away to punish you. I know, you walked away because staying would have meant accepting that your kindness had no value. That is not punishment, that is self-respect." Daniel was quiet for a long time. He thought about 15 years of insults, 15 years of being ignored, dismissed, and mocked, 15 years of helping people who never said thank you. But he also thought about the colony that Grant had saved, the children who had clung to her legs and cried with relief, the message Minister had sent afterward, thanking humanity for their mercy. "What do you want from us?" he asked. Leaned forward. "I want you to help us become better, not as servants, not as junior partners, as teachers. Show us how to be kind without expecting reward. Show us how to help without keeping score. Show us how to be more like you." Daniel had never expected to hear those words from any council species. He sat in silence, processing what it said. "There would need to be a public acknowledgement," he said finally, "from the full council, not just an apology but a recognition of what humanity contributed, what we gave up, what we offered." "Yes." "And a new charter, one that treats all species as genuine equals, regardless of how long they have been members." "Yes." "The summit would be held on a human station, on our terms." Smiled. It was a tired smile, the expression of someone who had finally reached the end of a long journey. "Yes." 2 weeks later, the summit convened on Harmony Station, the largest human facility in explored space. Representatives from all 12 council species attended. For the first time in history, they stood as humanity entered the chamber. Price walked beside Daniel Brooks, her data pad clutched to her chest. Behind them came the rest of the human delegation: Shaw, Dr. Laura, Commander Mitchell, Captain Grant and her daughter. They took their seats at the head of the table, facing the species who had once dismissed them as children. Elder Speaker rose and addressed the assembly. Her voice was weak with age, but every word carried clearly through the silent chamber. 16 weeks ago, we made a terrible mistake. We failed to see humanity's worth. We dismissed their kindness as weakness. We laughed at their contributions. We drove them away." She paused to look at each delegation in turn. "Today, we acknowledge that mistake. We apologize for our arrogance. We thank humanity for everything they gave us, even when we did not deserve it. And we ask humbly if they will give us another chance." Daniel Brooks stood. The chamber held its breath. "Humanity did not leave because we were angry," he said. "We left because we could not stay and accept that our worth was measured by the size of our fleet instead of the content of our character." He looked around the room at faces that had once been hostile, now showing hope and uncertainty. "We return not because we are needed, but because we were finally seen. We accept your apology. We accept the chance to begin again. But we ask you to remember what brought us to this moment." He gestured to who activated a display showing the new charter they had drafted. "This document does not create hierarchy. It does not measure worth by age or power. It asks only that every species treat every other species with respect, that we help each other not because we must, but because we choose to, that we see kindness not as weakness but as the highest form of strength." The council voted. Every species approved the charter. Every voice spoke in favor of the new beginning. Afterward, Counselor approached Daniel with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for coming back." Daniel smiled. "Thank you for giving us a reason." In the celebration that followed, Captain Grant watched her daughter receive a medal from both Human Command and the government. had disobeyed orders and risked her career to save 2 million lives. Now she was being honored for it. "You did good," told her. Shook her head. "I just did what humans do." Outside the station, through the viewing ports, children played in the observation deck. Human children and children and children, running together, laughing together, learning each other's games. Daniel Brooks watched them for a long time. He thought about everything humanity had endured. The insults, the dismissal, the long years of giving without receiving. It had been worth it, all of it, because this was what humans did. They planted seeds they might never see grow. They built bridges they might never cross. They loved a galaxy that did not always love them back. And sometimes, if they were patient enough, the galaxy learned to love them too. The summit ended with a promise. Not just words on a document, but a genuine commitment to do better, to see clearly, to value kindness as much as power. Humanity had walked out of the council chamber 16 weeks ago. They had returned not as victors or conquerors, but as something far more important. They had returned as partners, as equals, as friends. And the galaxy would never be the same.